All right, good afternoon and welcome to this week's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation webinar. I'm Matt Helmers with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and really fortunate to get to moderate the webinar, many webinars, but specifically excited for this one. Going to welcome back Dr. Laura Christianson. Dr. Christianson has uh, been gracious enough to present many times on the Iowa Learning Farms webinar series. Way back when she was probably a graduate student presenting on bioreactors, and she's continued to work on bioreactors. And Dr. Christensen, this had the fortune to take a family vacation this summer. And I mean, you go on a family vacation, you got to go look at bioreactors, right? So, some of us go look at beautiful prairies, and Laura goes and looks at bioreactors. But she's going to talk to us today about, I know what you did last summer, a Scandinavian bioreactor tour. All kidding aside, I think this is really important for us to know what's going on in other parts of the world that are facing many of the same challenges we are with nitrate. So with that, I'll turn the virtual floor over to Dr. Christensen. And if you have questions for Dr. Christensen, please type those in the chat box and we'll get those to her at the end of the talk. With that, Laura, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thanks, Matt. Can you hear me okay? Coming through?
Yep, I can hear you great.
Okay, great. To start, here we go. This will be the fastest 25-minute tour of Scandinavia that you will ever take in your life. But thank you for tuning in to hear about bioreactors in Scandinavia. And first, I want to acknowledge my amazing hosts in Scandinavia and their teams for taking so much time this past summer to geek out on bioreactors with me. And also a thank you to my hosts for letting me talk about their work today. That's got to be a little bit weird. So extra thank you for that. Here in the Midwest, we think of bioreactors as being a certain way or looking a certain way and fitting in our landscape in a certain way. But this technology is actually more flexible than that. And so that is the learning objective that we have for this webinar today. And I'll start by noting some things about our tile drainage wood chip bioreactors because we'll do some comparisons along our tour today. First of all, our bioreactors are simply defined as pits full of wood chips that clean nitrate out of tile drainage. More technically speaking, inside a bioreactor, we are enhancing the natural process of heterotrophic denitrification, which is the microbially mediated reduction of nitrate in the water to stable dinitrogen gas. This happens under anoxic or low oxygen conditions and is fueled by carbon, in this case, carbon that's sourced from our wood chips. And you can get real sciencey about it, but these are really relatively simple excavations that are lined and filled with wood chips. Some of the important design considerations that we have here are that one, our tile drainage systems are gravity fed. So there's usually no pumps in our drainage systems for the most part. And two, we do not want to back drainage water up in the field. We don't want to restrict drainage flow. So in consideration of those flow details, to get the water to flow right in our bioreactors are designed as horizontal flow reactors. You can see our inflow and outflow manifolds are located at the bottom of our bioreactors, so water flows from the inlet side to the outlet. And then we also set our control structures or manage the water in our bioreactors so that we do not saturate all of the wood chips. So you see those arrows there indicating the unsaturated portion of wood chips at the top of our bioreactors. That's just kind of how we design bioreactors here in the Midwest. I want to give you a feel for the scope of what we normally work with for tile drainage bioreactors in the Midwest, starting with our flow rates. Our median daily flow rates going through our reactors tend to be around 0.5 liter per second. For those of us that think in gallons per minute, that's about 8 gallons per minute. That's kind of the median average flow rate that we have going through our bioreactors. The average or median length of time that water stays inside our bioreactors ranges from about 3 to, I would say, 15 hours. Looking at the interquartile range there on that box plot, that's our HRT. Denitrification is a biological process, of course, so we have to give the bacteria enough time to do their job, to clean the water. And that's what hydraulic retention time is. So we're running from about maybe 3 to 15 hours hydraulic retention time. And then the annual flow weighted average nitrate concentration coming into our bioreactors averages around 8. That feels a little bit low. We definitely have higher nitrate concentrations coming in if you look at discrete samples, but annual flow weighted average nitrate coming in is roughly around 8. So just to lock in these rules of thumb, because we're going to refer to these, we're talking about half a liter per second flow rate, 3 to 15 hours hydraulic retention time, and roughly 10 or a little bit less milligrams per liter nitrate nitrogen coming into our bioreactors. You do not have to memorize that. I'll pop those back up on the screen to make our comparisons. One of the big reasons that we do bioreactors and lots of other practices in the upper Mississippi River Basin where I live is ultimately to reduce the size of the hypoxic zone in the Gulf. And I'm so used to talking about the hypoxic zone over these past 15 years, the hypoxic zone, dead zone, dead zone, dead zone, and you get kind of desensitized to it. It becomes kind of like a trite phrase. I'm sorry to admit that, but that feels like the case. So in the first few days when we were starting to think about this tour of Scandinavia, I started investigating and I came across things like this. 1,000 people gathered for a funeral for a fjord in Denmark. And this opinion piece, which translates to citizens meeting about the dead fjord, is wasted on post-it notes. And that kind of hit close to home because I've been in some post-it note meetings here. And then in something Norwegian I was translating, I saw this phrase, fjorduden, which means fjord death. Fjord death. And I think of Scandinavia, and especially as the fjords, as beautiful and pristine landscapes. These Scandinavian waters are UNESCO World Heritage Sites of outstanding international importance. And these Scandinavian waters are even ingrained in our popular culture as being something even kind of magical. And so to hear fjord death hits different. It feels different for me. It's a phrase that kind of cracked the shell on my desensitized dead zone brain because it reminded me that so many of us around the world are dealing with nutrient pollution and in particular nitrate pollution. And so, in a quest to do better and understand more, my family undertook a 5-week tour of Scandinavia in the early part of last summer. We stayed in 15 different places. We rode trains, planes, buses, ferries, rental cars, and of course did a lot of walking, as you do in Scandinavia, as you do in Europe, all with the purpose of visiting bioreactors across this beautiful part of the world. And I want to acknowledge the American Scandinavian Foundation. They run fellowship programs for both Americans and Scandinavians to do study exchanges for both students and senior scholars. So huge shout out to them. And I'll also mention the application process wasn't that hard, so look them up if you are interested at all. We'll start our tour today in beautiful Denmark, where I want to point out also that there has been a lot of great research on bioreactors specifically for tile drainage. I'm showing you some of those beauties here. But today, I really wanted to get away from tile drainage to expand our understanding of what bioreactors can be other than for tile drainage treatment. So we are starting at a fish farm in Denmark. And some of you know that I had small experience working in aquaculture in a previous life. And so this was extra special for me. The bioreactors at this fish farm are located right here. But starting at the front of the production facility, you see the production units lined up there, those 12 production tanks or production units. The overflow from those 4 sludge ponds, as well as the effluent from those production units, gets routed into this initial treatment wetland, and then it flows to the bioreactors, and then outflow from the bioreactors, goes to a second set of kind of polishing wetlands, and then of course the discharge point or the outlet of the facility. Fish farms, land-based fish farms, are highly regulated facilities in America as well as in Denmark. And the municipality actually samples the discharge from this farm twice monthly, randomly, as well as does sampling and invertebrate sampling and stuff in the stream. So zooming back in on the bioreactors, the 4 bioreactors operate in parallel. In other words, the total 100 liters per second flow rate coming from the facility gets divided into 4 and then flows into one of those 4 bioreactors. But these are not horizontal flow reactors like we talked about for here. These are vertical flow reactors. And this is not the farm I visited, but I like this drawing and the design is similar. So water comes in at the top of the bioreactor through pipes and kind of flows along the top of the wood chips. And then it infiltrates down through the wood chips. Those dotted lines that you see in the drawing are under drains, which underlay almost the entire length of the bioreactor. So this is called a vertical downward flow reactor. The pipes that you see sticking up allow you to backwash the under drains if your pipes clog, as well as help vent gas that can form in the under drains. And I understand that before they used these vertical standpipes, some of the under drains had kind of started to rise up or float because of the gas production. And I was surprised that there was so much gas production, but these vents, these pipes help anchor those pipes down, under drains down. So this is the one of the bioreactors that I visited at this fish farm. You see those vertical standpipes kind of dotting along the middle of the bioreactor, but really to me this looks kind of more like the open water surface of a wetland because all of the wood chips are submerged. So one of the big differences for us is that this is a vertical downward flow wetland that allows you to use the entire wood chip bed. And because you're using that entire volume of the wood chips, even though you have a really high flow rate, going into each bioreactor, 25 liters per second. Remember, ours was only about 0.5 liter per second. They still have a quite reasonable hydraulic retention time. Our hydraulic retention times are not that different, even though they're treating a lot more water. So it's great to see this high flow bioreactor application achieving great nitrate removal. I showed you this graph before. This is data from Illinois, our bioreactors, and for reference, at this fish farm, their nitrate is coming in at roughly 10 to 14 milligrams nitrate nitrogen per liter and leaving in the range of 2 to 6 milligrams nitrate nitrogen per liter. But of course, they're treating a lot more water than us. So it's exciting to see that. So, there's the technical stuff, which we spent all day talking about that kind of lives up here in your head. And then there's the stuff that you kind of feel. And leaving Denmark, I really was struck with a sense of pride in the rainbow trout being produced, a sense of pride in the production processes, a sense of pride in the entire production facilities from the start to the end, and also struck with a real genuine earnestness for society to understand the challenges of food production today. And that resonated with me because that pride and that earnestness were things that I have felt on many other farms around the world. So I felt really thankful to get to play a small role in that story by doing our wood chip bioreactors. Next, on to Norway, where bioreactors are being tried in road and tunnel construction processes. So as a Midwesterner, I know road construction. I feel like I know road construction. In Minnesota, we say there are 2 seasons, winter and road construction. But in Norway, road construction is totally different because they use blasting and explosives are required, especially for tunnel construction. And so you end up with large piles of waste rock. The reason bioreactors come into this whole process is because ammonium nitrate explosives are often used for the blasting, but not all of the nitrogen combusts when the explosives explode, which means that there ends up being some nitrogen in the waste rock pile itself, and that nitrogen leaches out over time. This is so different than how I think about nitrogen and tile drainage in agriculture. And so my first question was, okay, so how much of the nitrogen actually remains unexploded and actually leaches out? So I understand that decades ago, roughly 30% of the nitrogen would remain unexploded and then leach out, but that's down to about 10% due to improvements in the blasting process. And so that's an improvement. But then my second question was, aren't there other explosives that we can use other than ANFO so that this nitrate leaching isn't a problem. And yes, of course, there are other explosives that can be used, but cost is a big factor for using ammonium nitrate explosives, as well as safety and reliability. When you deal with explosives, you want it to explode when you want it to explode, and you do not want it to explode when you do not want it to explode. So again, this is totally a new thing that I was learning about. The specific bioreactor that I visited in Norway is protecting this water body. This lake happens to be one of the main drinking water sources for a small town you might have heard of called Oslo, Norway. Here's another image of that same lake that also shows some of the road construction work happening in this area. In this case, there was no specific permit or discharge criteria that the road construction company had to meet for the nitrogen leaching from the waste rock, other than all the regular environmental permits that they had to have to do the construction. However, the government was very strict in this case that they stipulated the construction company had to do something serious to address the nitrogen in the waste rock pile leachate. So something had to be done. And what they did was this pilot plant. They call it a pilot plant because it's experimental, but it is not pilot scale. This is a full-size bioreactor treatment facility. And the first thing you'll notice is that this is really a treatment train type of design. Just like in that aquaculture farm, there's a more sophisticated treatment design than just our pits full of wood chips. There's multiple things happening here. The blue arrow shows the direction of flow where the leachate is coming from. The rock pile is just off the right of the screen, and you can't really, it's hard to get a sense, but if you're standing at that red circle and looking up, that's the waste rock pile. And I say waste rock pile, but these are not just like piles of leaves that we rake up in our yard. These waste rock piles are mountains that become permanent fixtures in the landscape. So it's not a small pile. I also want to give you a sense of the topography at the site. So if you're sitting in your car on the road driving up, you can see how across the treatment system, the land really drops away. It was steep on all sides. This is Norway. This is not the Des Moines lobe. That was an Iowa joke. You're welcome. In terms of treatment, the first chamber provides some flow leveling, and then that second chamber is a sedimentation area as well as a purification pond. And then water from the purification pond is routed into one of the two bioreactors. They are not operated in series, they're operated in parallel. And the bioreactor sizes and shapes were really a function of the land forms and the topography that they had to work with, the space that was available. The bioreactors were filled with an 80-20 blend of 80% hardwood chips, which were alder, which was a local wood, and then 20% shell sand, which is used for pH control. This shell sand is also something that's been done in Denmark for bioreactors there. For practical application in the US, I don't think we've ever really added shell sand or limestone to control pH, but it was one of those things where I thought pH isn't really that hard to measure. Maybe we should be doing some more measurements of pH at ours. Here's total nitrogen concentrations at that bioreactor system that I just showed you. This is total nitrogen, but most of the total nitrogen is in the nitrate form. So remember, just for reference, our bioreactors typically treat in the range of 10 milligrams nitrate nitrogen per liter. That's annual average again, but you see quite high concentrations possible coming from that waste rock leachate. The other interesting thing to note about this blasting application for bioreactors is that the nitrogen in the waste rock piles is finite. The nitrogen in the leachate will eventually run out. And that's a little bit different than how we think about nitrate in tile drainage. So the nitrogen in the waste rock leachate will eventually run out, so you don't need the bioreactors forever. And so coming back to the design, especially those first two chambers, which might have seemed a little bit like overkill in this bioreactor design, those are also designed to continue to provide treatment for regular pollutants in road runoff, like highway runoff pollutants, even after the denitrifying bioreactors are no longer needed for nitrate. So they have a much longer term vision in mind, even after the nitrate in the waste rock leaches out. And then our final stop is Sweden, where the bioreactor that I visited was also for a blasting application, just like in Norway. But the blasting being done was at an iron mine rather than for road or tunnel construction. The iron mine here in Kiruna, Sweden, was owned and operated by the LKAB mining company. This is the largest underground iron mine in the world. It was thrilling to get to visit this amazing site. The magnetite that is mined here is very pure. That's relatively rare, and that's really a point of pride for this particular mine. And I want to make the point that often when water people talk about mining activities, we often talk about acid mine drainage. But the rock here, the magnetite here is very pure, and so it doesn't contain a lot of sulfide. In many mining applications, when sulfide reacts with oxygen and water, it forms sulfuric acid, and that's the acid in acid mine drainage. But because the rock here is so pure, this is not an acid mine drainage treatment situation. The pH of the waste rock leachate is very neutral, and so bioreactors are really a slam dunk at this mine. Just for reference, Kiruna, Sweden, the mine and the bioreactors at the mine are located at this red circle here. And as you know, the Arctic Circle is approximately here. This is not a warm climate. So that raises the question, denitrification is influenced by temperature because it's a biological process. So how do they denitrify inside the Arctic Circle? The answer is, in short, by using good design. These bioreactors operate at an HRT, hydraulic retention time, of roughly 4 days. So you can see that the flow rates coming in for these Swedish bioreactors and for our bioreactors are pretty similar, but because their bioreactors are bigger, they operate at a much longer hydraulic retention time. They also have vertical baffles that route the water deeper in the bioreactor. And then I'll also say wetlands people like to make fun of bioreactors because there's not a lot to see once it's built. And that was the case here. This bioreactor is actually under an extra meter of peat insulation. So it's well insulated, well designed, and well operated. Here's nitrate concentrations from a recent study of this bioreactor. You see nitrate concentrations from the waste rock leachate, pile leachate, coming in at roughly 30 milligrams nitrate nitrogen per liter, all the way up to more than 90, which is would be very high in tile drainage. But you see that bioreactor is doing a really excellent job of reducing those nitrate concentrations. I talked about the fjords and the pristineness of the Scandinavian fjords at the beginning of the presentation, but I want to highlight that here in Kiruna, it's a subarctic environment. So it's like a tundra and taiga type biome or ecoregion, and those environments are naturally very nutrient poor. And so any nutrient pollution, any nitrate pollution in this environment is especially bad. And so it's great to see these bioreactors working so well to address that issue. And the effectiveness of these bioreactors really drove home for me something that one of my favorite people once said: bioreactors will work as long as the water is in the liquid form. The rest is a matter of good design and good operation. And just in case the name Kiruna, Sweden sounds familiar to you, it was in the international news just a couple weeks ago. A portion of the town is subsiding because of a century or more of mining activities. And so LKAB has invested and will continue to invest on the order of 2 billion with a B, US dollars, essentially to relocate that portion of the town. And so getting to be there when that transition was ongoing and getting to see the mining facility and the massive waste rock piles that just dominate this landscape, seeing that all up close reminded me that mining, just like agriculture, leaves a serious and obvious fingerprint on our landscape. And then being about 500 meters underground made me appreciate that I am a surface dweller, but also made me appreciate iron and the ways we use iron in so many ways in modern society today. And so I left feeling really grateful that my research colleagues and LKAB are using wood chip bioreactors and also continually making process improvements across their entire facility to do better. Coming to the end of our tour today, I'll recap that we talked about new applications for wood chip bioreactors that are different from tile drainage. We talked about ideas like vertical flow, vertical downward flow orientation, and the importance of hydraulic retention time. We talked about how bioreactors can fit within a more sophisticated treatment system. And then we talked about how denitrification is not just possible, but is being done in a very cold climate. A 25-minute tour of Scandinavia may not have been as fulfilling as a 5-week tour, but I hope you use this opportunity to think boldly about where you may travel next. And at the very least, I hope that I will see you at the next Bioreactor Field Day. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks so much, Laura. Please type your questions in if you have them. I'll go through the logistical items. If you watch this webinar live and are wanting to earn a CCA CEU, please email Alena Whitaker, ALENAW, at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. Include your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar and your CCA number. Again, ALENAW at iastate.edu. Let's go to the next slide. If you watch this webinar live and are willing to fill out a voluntary demographic survey, we'd greatly appreciate it. You can scan that QR code, or you can go to iwilllearningfarms.org/survey. Either one of those. If you've filled out a demographic survey already in calendar year 2025, thank you very much. That's all you need to do. So just one for any 2025 webinar. If not, if you're willing to do it, that would be great. We'll go to the next slide, which should be, okay, we're going to again next week talk about edge of field practices. So Dr. Wendong Zhang, that's with Cornell University now. Many of you may remember him from being at Iowa State University. He and Dr. Jacqueline Comito have been doing some work on adoption of edge of field practices and decoding the messenger effect. And then next one should be if you know somebody that would like this webinar. I mean, who wouldn't? Please let them know that those are archived on the iwilllearningfarms.org website, or we have a YouTube channel just for webinars. So if you like this, there's probably another one you'd like. So go look at the archives for that. And with that, Laura, let's get started. First question was, how do they know that they don't have a water shortcut when the water's on top of the bioreactor?
In the aquaculture application, so I know they've done tracer tests, but when you calculate hydraulic retention time, it's just a matter of using the entire reactor. And so they've done tracer tests, and it really is a pretty good design, especially because they're using all of the wood chips, whereas we do not. There could be some short circuiting where it comes in right away. But I think it's a pretty robust design, and the nitrate removal that they achieve speaks to that.
Okay. And there was a question here kind of asking about that. What's the reason for leaving some of the wood chips unsaturated in the Midwest horizontal bioreactors versus the vertical bioreactors that might be fully saturated?
Yeah, so I came away really trying to think if we could retrofit the vertical downward flow idea practically in our systems, for our drainage systems, and I still can't figure out exactly how we would do that without backing drainage water up. The reason we leave some wood chips unsaturated, I think, is because originally we were thinking the wood chips would break down and then those top wood chips would drop kind of, and we would be able to use those. I don't think it really has ended up working like that. So I'll reiterate, our bioreactors work, but it's always, as a researcher, a process of how can we make them work better.
Yep. Okay. How are the wood chips at the fish facility disposed of? Did you ask that?
They have not recharged their bioreactors yet. I recall that they were built maybe in 2019. And so I asked if they had recharged or replaced the wood chips, and they hadn't, and they
Okay.
didn't have any plans to yet. The bioreactors were still working well. And so I don't think that they've had to replace them yet.
Okay. This is kind of one relevant to even, I think, Midwestern conditions. So they commented that at the fish farm bioreactor in Denmark, the bioreactor seems to be open to the air. Are there downsides to having a bioreactor pit that is open to the air versus a soil cap on it?
Yeah, so so at the one in Denmark, it's a depth of wood chips. I don't want to say a meter of wood chips, and then it has like 30 centimeters of water on the top. So the denitrification process is not really being influenced by oxygen coming into the water. And so I think that water cap essentially helps keep the denitrification happening a little bit better. There are some bioreactors that will be like fully encased in plastic to make
Mm.
sure you don't have oxygen coming into the top. I think one thing for us is that we really want to keep the construction process simple.
Mhm.
So, yeah, keeping oxygen out is important, but soil covers or wood chip covers help with that too.
There's a question about the kind of the people mourning the fjord. Was that mainly from agricultural non-point sources? And are bioreactors being used for treating agricultural um, discharge, I guess?
Yeah, as I recall, agriculture is a significant component of the nutrient runoff in Denmark, for sure. Not so different from here. There's obviously going to be other sources, just like here, urban sources and point sources also. Um, then the second part of that question was, are bioreactors being used for agricultural sources? Yes, a lot of great bioreactor research has been done in Denmark, specifically for tile drainage. Their bioreactors have tended to be much larger than ours, treating much larger drainage areas than ours. And I understand that they have moved somewhat away from bioreactors. They really are focusing on nature-based solutions, which I also consider bioreactors, but they're really looking for um, removing land from production to put it back into a natural area, as well as really more natural type of constructed wetlands, restored wetlands type.
Yeah. Have they looked at the lifespan for the roadside nitrate leaching? And I guess, yeah, as they've designed these, have they thought about the lifespan of them and if there's enough wood chips there to meet the need?
Yeah, so the roadside one that I visited was built in 2021, fall of 2021, and they actually replaced some of the wood chips in 2024. So they just a portion of the wood chips based on the budget, they didn't have enough to replace all of the wood chips. So they did feel like there was already a carbon limitation.
Mhm.
Some of the nitrate concentrations are, I feel like, are higher than what we have in tile drainage. So they might have already been achieving did I say nitrate limitation? I meant carbon limitation.
Okay.
So they have already replaced some of those wood chips.
Okay. Regarding the vertical bioreactors, were the higher flow rates achievable into the system as a function of the inflow pipe design or more so a physical bioreactor sizing as compared to the horizontal bioreactors?
I would say the second one.
Okay.
um,
Physical bioreactor sizing. Okay.
yeah, the bioreactors are much larger
Okay.
than what we do. But I also think it's that vertical flow design where they can use all of the wood chips.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are they diverting the leachate from the rock waste piles versus that leachate becoming recharged to deeper groundwater?
I think it's collected underneath the
Okay.
piles before they construct. And I guess we didn't really talk about, I don't remember really talking about that. But I think it's collected and routed underground.
Okay. Somebody asked if you could put the slide on the Fjord Doden back up. I think we have time for a few more questions if anybody has them. I think we've gotten through most of,
Are you seeing? Okay. Oh, that was at the beginning.
yeah.
Okay, close your eyes. I'm flipping quickly.
It's okay. There's lots of nice pictures. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Here, yep.
Oh,
Here. Oh,
okay. Uh, Somebody's curious about the long HRT site in Sweden. Was there any concern about causing greenhouse gas emissions after all the nitrate is removed?
they have done that research group has done an excellent job at looking at greenhouse gases, all the microbiology, all of the things. And so I will say that they've researched that. I don't remember, they're not, I don't think they're concerned about it because the mine is moving forward with more bioreactors. So I would say
Okay,
it's not a concern. But I will also say, really, the only other thing of concern in that leachate at that mine is nitrate, but then also sulfate. And so
okay.
they actually, it's a good thing for them to have really long retention times because they can clean the nitrate out and then they can also start to remove the sulfate.
Sulfate, yeah.
So it's just a different thing.
Okay, so that was, yeah, there was a question about if they were treating more than nitrate in Scandinavia and other chemicals from the slag, and it sounds like sulfate.
Yeah, and I'll mention too for the aquaculture applications, that research group has done an excellent job at looking at other things that can be in aquaculture wastewater.
Mm.
Just a very recent paper that came out looking at, I believe, some maybe some antibiotics or some chemicals that are used, as well as formaldehyde, which is sometimes used as a
Oh, yeah.
disinfectant. That's the amazing thing about bioreactors is that it's just a carbon source. And
Yeah.
so a lot of things can be cleaned out of the water.
Okay. All right. Laura, I think that really answers the questions. As always, thank you so much for a great presentation. I think you got the most reactions that we've had here. So thank you so very much. You know, there's a positive impact. So thank you so much for being willing to share this. Thank you folks for listening in today. Um, Certainly thoughts are with our federal colleagues that may be impacted by the shutdown. So certainly those are in our thoughts, and I have a feeling there might be some folks coming back and watching the archive of this that might have missed it, because of that. So thanks again, Laura. Thanks everybody for attending. Please consider tuning in next week to hear Dr. Wendong Zhang.
Thanks, Matt. Bye, guys.